Welcome to another episode of Rennch. On today's show, I'm going to show you some of my metalwork finishing techniques. Before I get started with anything, I just want to say thank you to all the veterans and service members. It is Memorial Day, hence my fatigue color scheme today. Thank you so much for your sacrifice and for your service. We are all in a tremendous amount of debt to you and your sacrifice. Now you may be thinking, are we really doing another flare video? And the truth is, I wasn't going to. I had no intention of doing any more videos on installing these flares. But if you remember, my passenger side front flare was an absolute and utter train wreck. I had to patch it, I had to completely rebuild it in that last video, and there was this huge divot where I couldn't make the thing work the way I needed it to, but I was able to patch it, and if you can see behind me, it is absolutely spectacular. It is so good, and that's because I use some of the techniques I'm about to show you guys right now. The truth is, I got into a groove with this thing, and look how good it looks now. It's so good. Literally, if I spent maybe another 20 minutes on it, it would be completely invisible. As it is now, it will require the bare amount of filler before it's perfect. And I think that's what we really all aspire to do. To me, it's this huge learning process, and I'm going to show you basically the other flare, which still needs more welding and grinding, and then some of these techniques I'm about to show you now. I needed to do it, so I thought I would just take you guys along for the ride. So as you can see, the one that was perfect, the one that I loved, still needs quite a bit of work. You see all of that? There's still a visible lip here. I still feel it. These are things that basically what you want to do in this case is you can fill these with some weld if it's sort of topped out like that. I'm also going to try to patch every single hole there is, and then I'm going to show you how I'm using body files to make this as smooth of a transition as possible. The first thing I'm looking for here is, does this fender have any pinholes? To do that, you got to kind of get on the inside. And you can see him there. You see the light shining through? Thankfully, I only have literally like 3 or 4 in this whole thing. There's one right there. That's the big one. This is the big one right here. And oftentimes I'll weld it from the inside, so it's not really relevant. The other thing I'm going to want to do is some of these gaps. Like if you see this dark here, I will often want to weld in those spots. Some of it just indicates that it's not ground down far enough, and that's fine. But the other times it means that you're sort of, I guess it's called undercutting, and I would need to fill in some of that spot with some metal. And I typically do that on a lower voltage. So I'm not really trying to go through. I'm just basically trying to, I'm almost using it as body filler, where like, so I'll probably do it right here because this is a low spot. So I'd throw a little bit of like 3 or 4 little spots right there, because that way it'll grind smooth. The other thing I'm going to do is I'll grind out the inside and hammer and dolly it until I'm comfortable with what these curves are like before I really start grinding everything. So now that I know where the pinholes are, now it's a matter of like, this almost becomes artwork at this point, because once material is there, you could hammer and dolly it until the overall shape of the metal is right, and then you can grind off everything that's not supposed to be there. Ooh, cool. That's like an old military plane, like a P-51 Mustang or something. That was cool. So I'm going to weld the pinholes. I'm going to set my welder, instead of being on C, which is where I usually weld, which is kind of the middle of its range, I'll put it on B so it doesn't penetrate quite as much. And again, I'm kind of using it as filler, if you will. I'm going to hit these pinholes, and hit some of these kind of undercut spots, grind out the inside, and then hammer and dolly everything so it feels good. And then it's gonna be careful grinding and filing, and that is, to me, where all of the art is. Now that I've added all the material, it's time to remove it. I'm gonna flip it over and give it a grind with this 40 grit flap disc. Then I'm going to put a fresh 40 grit grinding disc on here to start the process of really gently grinding off the welds on the outside. All right, here's where we are after one level of grinding, welding, grinding. I still have a pretty significant lip here. This all looks pretty rough. I've got a lip here. Pretty much you can see all the lips where it's dark. And I've done some initial hammer and dolly work. I've put a brand new, fresh disc on. And what I'm gonna do is really lightly, I'm gonna go over these spots that are still proud and then re-hammer and dolly everything. And I'll show you sort of the next phase of finishing. Okay, after a careful grind, we are really a lot better. You can see I still have a couple of little spots here, little like undercut spots, little holes that I'm gonna go and hit with my welder really quick. I will go over these basically individually and grind them until they are invisible. Okay, so we are really close now after a few grinds and welds, and now is where the magic really happens. For that, we will go back in the garage. Now, for everything we just did, welding and grinding and locating the pinholes and filling them, this section right here, to me, is where the magic happens. Now, it's worth noting that this is so far beyond what you would need to do normally, and you'd easily just throw a little bit of body filler on here and Bob's your uncle and you're good to go. For this section, we're gonna use these three tools. I've got a flat file, I've got a curved file, and I've got this, I call it a slapping, what do I call this thing? It's like this is called like a shrinking file. And it's kind of complicated, but basically you hit the metal and it attacks the ridges above a divot. So what you typically do is you'd put like a dolly behind the divot and you tap this thing and that would shrink the ridges. Think of it like a crater ridge. It would tighten that crater ridge up so the ridge flattens out. It's really cool how it works. But you can also use it just generally to keep something flat. So what I've been doing is I begin with this flat file and I start working the fender and start looking where the high and the low spots are. And to do that, I usually use a little bit of primer. Like I'll just hit it with a little bit of primer like this. And basically I'm using the primer as a guide coat. So I will pretty easily be able to see what's high and what's low as I scrape the car. So I'll let that dry for a second. And I'll be able to work it with the flat file, then the slapping file, And then the beauty, the creme de la creme, as they say in the creme business, the round file. Yeah, that's the deal right there. All right, so this thing is really integrated and really smooth now. Not totally invisible yet, but there's one more step, and that is what I call the Spider-Man. You want a garage / life hack? Wash your hands with Tide. It's killer. It works really, really well. Formulated to take grease out, like Dawn takes grease out of your way. But it works really good, and I need my hands clean for this next and final procedure. This roll of 3M 80 grit came from my Amazon wish list, which you can check out at Rennch.com/high5. And I put them on my hands like Spider-Man. Finally, a quick wipe down with a little simple green, just to degrease everything. And we have a killer welded flare that you'd be proud to not paint. Now, is it completely perfect? No, but it could be. Another couple of rounds of welding. I mean, maybe, literally a couple, and a little bit more hammer and dolly work, and this thing completely goes away. Now, one thing that's kind of cool about spraying that primer on there is that the spots that are low kind of stay dark, and you can still see, like, I literally could see like where my impact is from the hammers, and you sort of see how all of the filler is going to fill when the time comes. I can see that I could grind that a teeny bit more. Like, everything gets revealed when you do this primer, or, you know, we call it guide coat, really is what it's called. But I couldn't be, you know, happier. This looks so good. Let me show you guys close up what it looks like. So there it is. I mean, it's hard to, you know, imagine, but most don't look like this before they get into, you know, Bondo and that kind of thing. This thing just looks really good. I mean, if I go really close up, you can see, you know, a little bit of inconsistency, but in general, this thing is just smooth and integrated and pretty invisible. There's a couple spots down here, but it's like the quickest thing in the world to do a little bit of filler on the seam, the same fiberglass filler that I've done in the past. I can feel that's a little hump. You know, sometimes you just need a little hump. In this case, I do not want a little hump. Give that a little "how's your mother?" And quick sand. And we're back to being smooth as butter. So there we have it, guys. I mean, I couldn't be happier with how that turned out. I think it's great. Great way to spend a Memorial Day. I'm gonna get some charcoal briquettes now and grill a burger, I think. Now, a few of you guys have asked, why have I abandoned doing lead filler? And the truth is, I haven't abandoned it. These weren't close enough yet where I would have used the lead filler. But the other part is, you know, having done the lead filler on my quarter panels and on the drip rails, it is really hard, probably above my pay grade, to do lead filler on vertical surfaces like this. It's really tough. And after experiencing the epoxy resin diluted fiberglass filler that I used on the other side there, I don't think I want to go back to it. We've caught up from a modern standpoint. We've definitely caught up to that technology. The stuff is super strong. It is loads easier to install and shave down. So what I'll do is I'll run a layer of that fiberglass filler right here in this seam. Again, if I just clear coated this thing right now, nobody would complain about how it looks underneath. Like, I think it looks really good. But I'm gonna run the fiberglass filler on, and then, you know, the whole car is gonna get some layer of, you know, filler, so the thing is as smooth as humanly possible. But that's basically the reason. It's just a bit of too much of a pain in the ass to work with. All right, well, so that's it, guys. Thanks so much for watching. I'm not sure if I'm gonna be able to get another video out before I leave. I'm actually going to Turkey for a few days. And if I can get one more video out, I'll shoot you another video this week. Hopefully I can. And then it'll be a little bit of a delay. I'll be there out of town, and then I'll come back. And then I've got a new series coming up. We're gonna put the Blasphemy build on hold for a moment because I have the 2021 Targa California coming up, and I've got to get the Grey Ghost ready for it. So there's oil changes and brake upgrades and classic retrofit air conditioning upgrades and alternator upgrades and all kinds of cool stuff that I'm gonna be doing to that car to get it ready for the Targa. So a lot of cool content coming your way. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do. You know, we're not as big as some of the Throttles and the Mighty Car Modses, but I feel like we have a good, intimate relationship together. In fact, bring it in. Give me a hug. Okay.